The Gilded Age heiress died suddenly while riding her favorite horse. It was December 1934, and Mary Harriman Rumsey was at the peak of her power, a woman born into one of America's greatest fortunes who had chosen a life of fierce public service over easy luxury. By the end of this story, you will understand how a single moment shattered a legacy still in the making. We will explore the glittering world she came from and the powerful enemies she may have made in Washington. Was her tragic fall simply a riding accident, or did something more sinister befall a woman who dared to challenge the powerful? What does it truly mean to live a life of purpose when you have every reason not to? The staggering wealth that defined Mary's life was not inherited from old money, but forged in fire and steel by her father. Edward Henry Harriman was a financial titan whose name became synonymous with the Union Pacific Railroad. He was a man of slight physical stature, but possessed an immense, almost ruthless will. He took a struggling railroad and, through a combination of brilliant strategy and cutthroat business tactics, transformed it into a continental powerhouse. His empire did not just move trains, it moved the American economy itself, carving pathways across mountains and deserts, and amassing a fortune so vast it was almost incomprehensible. Imagine a net worth in the hundreds of billions by today's standards, all controlled by one family. This was the world Mary Harriman was born into in 1881, a world of unimaginable privilege. But with that privilege came a heavy, unspoken burden. The Harriman children were not merely raised to be socialites. They were groomed to be stewards of a legacy. Their father expected nothing less than excellence and a profound sense of duty. While others in their social circle might be content with a life of endless parties and European tours, Mary and her siblings were taught that their immense good fortune carried with it an immense responsibility. This unique upbringing placed Mary at a curious crossroads in New York high society. She had the name, the wealth, and the social standing to do absolutely nothing of consequence. Yet, simmering beneath the surface of the debutante was a mind shaped by her father's formidable ambition and a heart questioning what true service really meant. The sprawling grounds of Arden, the Harriman family estate, were a world unto themselves. 40,000 acres of New York wilderness served as a private kingdom, a gilded cage of unparalleled luxury. Here, Mary's days were structured by private tutors, and her world was populated by the most influential figures of the age, from politicians to industrialists, all guests at her father's table. This was not a life of simple idleness, however. While other heirs to great fortunes were learning to dance and make polite conversation, the Harriman children were absorbing lessons in economics, railroad management, and global politics. Edward Harriman was building more than a fortune. He was building a dynasty of capable minds, instilling in his children a relentless drive to achieve and, crucially, to contribute. The family's summer tours of Europe were not mere vacations. They were immersive studies in culture and history, designed to broaden their perspectives far beyond the manicured lawns of their home. This unique environment created a powerful tension within Mary. She possessed every trapping of a Gilded Age heiress, yet she was being molded for something far greater than a society marriage. She moved through ballrooms and salons, but the conversations that truly captivated her were about social reform and public service. How does one reconcile the immense privilege of a 40,000-acre playground with a growing sense of duty to those who had nothing? This question would become the central conflict of her life, a quiet rebellion brewing in the heart of American aristocracy. The accident that awaited her was decades away, but the path that made her a target was being paved with every lesson in responsibility she learned at Arden. The Harriman household was not a nursery for idleness, but a training ground for future titans. Mary's brother, William Averill Harriman, was groomed from birth to be his father's successor, a man who would translate the family's economic power into global political influence. Averill would indeed walk the world stage, becoming a trusted advisor to presidents and later a governor and diplomat who helped shape the Cold War. In another family, Mary's own formidable intellect might have been channeled into supporting her brother's ascent, a loyal sister in the background. But Mary Harriman was cut from a different cloth. While Averill navigated the masculine worlds of high finance and international politics, Mary turned her gaze inward toward the pressing social needs at America's own doorstep. She watched the immense inequality festering in the shadow of skyscrapers built by fortunes like her own, and she chose a different form of power. Her arena would not be the boardroom or the embassy, but the settlement house and the committee room, fighting for labor reform and social welfare. This was a radical departure for a woman of her station. While her brother accumulated political capital, Mary was building a different kind of legacy, one rooted in the gritty, hands-on work of social justice. She was not content to be a Harriman by name alone. She was determined to define what that name could mean in terms of tangible good. This divergence of paths highlights a fascinating dynamic within this powerhouse family, each sibling wielding the family fortune and influence as a tool, but for vastly different ends. Where Averill sought to steer nations, Mary sought to save individuals, a choice that would lead her into a different kind of danger entirely. Her debut into New York society was everything a Gilded Age heiress could want. The ballroom glittered. The guest list was a registry of the city's most powerful families, and all eyes were on Mary Harriman. Yet for Mary, this pinnacle of social acceptance felt more like a cage than a coronation. While other young women of her set saw the debutante season as their ultimate purpose, a prelude to a strategic marriage, Mary viewed it as a distraction. She performed the required rituals with grace, but her mind was elsewhere, already turning toward the city's grimier, more honest streets. The same year she was presented to society, she was also visiting settlement houses on the Lower East Side, seeing for herself the brutal poverty that existed just a few miles from her family's mansion. This was not a charitable hobby for her, it was an education. She did not just want to write a check. She wanted to understand the systems that created such inequality, and more importantly, how to change them. While her peers discussed fashion and potential suitors, Mary was building an entirely different life for herself, one of substance and action. She founded the Junior League for the Promotion of Settlement Movements, an organization that channeled the energy and resources of young privileged women into direct social work. This was a revolutionary idea, turning the traditional debutante season on its head. Instead of simply being presented to society, these women would actively engage with it, rolling up their sleeves to teach classes, provide childcare, and advocate for better living conditions. Mary was not merely a philanthropist. she was a community organizer, leveraging her social position to mobilize an entire class of women toward a common good. This set her profoundly apart. She was a woman who possessed everything the world told her she should want, and yet she chose a path of gritty, demanding service. The Junior League began not as a grand national institution, but as a quiet, determined idea in the mind of a 19-year-old Mary Harriman. In 1901, she gathered 80 of her fellow debutantes, women who had also been presented to society, and proposed a radical alternative to a life of leisure. Her vision was simple yet profound. They would use their education, their social standing, and their collective energy not for self-indulgence, but for social uplift. They would volunteer in the settlement houses of New York City, places like the college settlement on Rivington Street, where they could teach English, provide nursing care, and offer vocational training to immigrant families struggling in tenement squalor. This was hands-on, face-to-face work. It was one thing to donate money from a distance, but Mary insisted on proximity, on understanding the human reality of the problems they sought to solve. The organization was first called the Junior League for the Promotion of Settlement Movements, a name that reflected its very specific, action-oriented mission. It was a direct challenge to the conventions of their class. Why should a young woman's most valuable years be spent waiting for a marriage proposal when she could be rebuilding a community? The League offered a purpose that the ballroom simply could not. It gave these privileged women a window into a world they were insulated from, and in doing so, it gave them a voice. They began to advocate for better housing, safer working conditions, and public health initiatives, learning how to turn their compassion into effective political and social pressure. The idea proved so powerful and so necessary that it spread like wildfire. Within a decade, the Junior League was not just a New York phenomenon, it was a national movement. Chapters sprang up in city after city, from Boston to Chicago, each adapting Mary's core principle to address the unique needs of their own communities. They established orphanages, founded public libraries, and created some of the nation's first juvenile courts. This was not charity as it had been traditionally practiced. It was systemic social work driven by the organized power of women who refused to be idle. Mary Harriman's legacy, therefore, is not frozen in a single moment from 1901. It lives in the millions of lives touched over more than a century by an organization that redefined the role of women in public life. She channeled the untapped potential of an entire social class into a force for civic good, proving that privilege, when coupled with purpose, could become one of the most powerful engines for reform in American history. Mary Harriman's commitment to social reform ran far deeper than a single organization. Her work in the settlement houses of New York was not a fleeting interest. It was the foundation of a lifelong crusade. She immersed herself in the daily struggles of immigrant families, witnessing firsthand the desperate need for child care so mothers could work, the overcrowded and unsanitary tenements that bred disease, and the lack of access to basic education. These were not abstract social ills to her. They were human crises demanding immediate and intelligent solutions. She became a powerful advocate for child welfare, pushing for reforms that would protect the most vulnerable from exploitation and neglect. Her approach was characteristically thorough and systemic. She did not just fund a nursery, she studied and promoted the latest ideas in early childhood development. She did not just decry poor housing. She worked with architects and city planners to advocate for model tenements with light, air, and proper sanitation. Her philanthropy was always coupled with a fierce intellect, a drive to understand the root cause of a problem and to implement a lasting fix. This led her naturally into the complex world of education reform, where she championed vocational training and practical skills that could offer a tangible path out of poverty. Mary understood that charity alone was a temporary salve. True progress required changing the very systems that perpetuated inequality. She used her name not just to open doors, but to challenge the powerful men behind them, arguing for labor laws, public health initiatives, and educational investments with the same determination her father once used to build a railroad. This was the portrait of a modern activist, decades ahead of her time, who saw her immense privilege not as a shield from the world's problems, but as a tool she was obligated to wield against them. Into this world of determined social action strode a man who seemed her perfect counterpart in both spirit and station. Charles Carey Rumsey was not a staid banker or a distant European aristocrat, the kind of match often expected for a Harriman heiress. He was a dashing and celebrated sculptor, a man whose hands shaped bronze and marble into powerful, dynamic forms. His artistic fame was matched by his athletic prowess as one of the nation's top polo players, a figure of vibrant physicality and creative passion. Their courtship was a meeting of two prominent families, yes, but more importantly, it was a union of two kindred souls who shared a profound love for life lived outdoors and at full gallop. They married in 1918, a partnership that promised a blend of art, action, and shared purpose. Their mutual passion for horses became a central thread of their life together. He was a horseman of legendary skill, and she was an accomplished and fearless rider. Their estate, known as the Plains in Virginia, was not just a home but a haven for this shared love, filled with the sounds of whinnies and the scent of hay and leather. This was not a quiet, retiring marriage of Gilded Age convention. It was an active, vigorous partnership built on a foundation of physical courage and a deep appreciation for the raw beauty of the natural world. In Charles, Mary found a husband who did not seek to temper her own adventurous spirit, but who championed it. They rode together, they entertained artists and intellectuals, and they raised a family amidst this vibrant, energetic world. Their happiness, however, was anchored in a shared vulnerability, a mutual understanding of the very real risks that came with the equestrian life they both adored. This passion, which brought them so much joy, would also set the stage for the single moment that would irrevocably shatter their world. Horses were not merely a pastime for Mary, they were an extension of her very being. In the saddle, the constraints of her social world fell away, replaced by a raw, unmediated partnership with a powerful animal. This passion was the core of her life with Charles, a world centered on the stables of their Virginia estate and the manicured fields of the polo circuit. They did not just own horses, they lived and breathed the equestrian culture, a realm where old money met breathtaking athleticism. Their stables were filled with the finest thoroughbreds, each animal a testament to their discerning eye and deep understanding of equine grace. For Mary, riding was not a sedate trot through a park. It was the explosive thrill of the hunt, the demanding precision of the show ring, and the shared, wind-whipped joy of a gallop across open country with her husband. This world was one of polished leather and flying manes, of the sharp, clean smell of the stable and the thunderous applause from the sidelines of a polo match. It was in this arena that Charles excelled as a national star, his artistic sensibility translating into a poetic control over horse and mallet. Together, they formed a formidable pair, celebrated not just for their wealth, but for their genuine skill and courage. This shared identity as elite horsemen was a source of immense pride and profound connection. Yet this very passion, which defined so much of their happiness, was inextricably linked to its inherent peril. Every jump taken, every powerful animal mounted, carried a silent, understood risk. The same vitality that made her feel most alive also placed her in a world of constant, unpredictable danger. How could anyone have known that this defining part of her life was quietly setting the stage for its sudden, final act? The world of horses and high society in Virginia was a world Mary loved, but it was not the only world she was destined to command. A new chapter began when her husband, Charles, was appointed to the Federal Reserve Board, pulling the family into the powerful orbit of Washington, D.C. The capital in the 1920s was a city of stark contrasts, where grand neoclassical buildings housed a government grappling with the aftermath of a world war and the gathering storm of economic uncertainty. For another society wife, this move might have meant a calendar filled with teas and receptions. For Mary Harriman Rumsey, it was an invitation to the most important conversation in the nation. She stepped into the city's vibrant intellectual scene not as a spectator, but as a participant. Her home became a salon, a gathering place for the most forward-thinking minds of the era, economists and lawyers, labor leaders and progressive politicians. Here, over dinner, the ideas that would eventually shape the New Deal were first debated and refined. Mary was not merely a hostess providing the venue. She was a keen interlocutor. Her own sharp intellect, forged in the settlement houses of New York, now applied to the macro problems of a struggling nation. She listened, she questioned, and she built a formidable network of alliances based on mutual respect. These connections were not social trophies. They were the foundation of a different kind of power, one built on trust and shared purpose. It was through this web of influence that she came to the attention of a man who would change the course of American history, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He recognized in Mary a rare combination, a woman who understood both the corridors of immense wealth and the desperate struggles of the working poor. When he took office in 1933, facing the gravest economic crisis the country had ever seen, he knew he needed people who could think in bold, unprecedented ways. He needed people like Mary Harriman Rumsey. Her deep immersion in the capital's intellectual life had positioned her perfectly for a role that would leverage all her experience, a role that would place her at the very heart of the New Deal and perhaps directly in the path of powerful enemies. President Roosevelt saw in Mary Harriman Rumsey the ideal person for a monumental task. He appointed her as the very first chairwoman of the Consumer Advisory Board for the National Recovery Administration, a cornerstone of his New Deal. This was not a ceremonial post. The NRA was the government's most ambitious and direct effort to pull the nation from the depths of the Great Depression. Its goal was to create a partnership between government, industry, and labor, establishing fair codes of competition that would set wages, prices, and working hours to revive the economy. And at this critical table, representing the voice of the American consumer, sat Mary. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Here was a woman, a known socialite from one of America's wealthiest families, handed immense power in a world dominated entirely by men. Her appointment sent shockwaves through Washington. Many of the seasoned politicians and industrialists she now had to negotiate with saw her as an outsider, a dilettante whose only qualification was her famous last name. They expected her to be a figurehead, a gracious hostess who would lend a touch of class to the proceedings, but would ultimately defer to the real experts in the room. They were about to be profoundly mistaken. Mary did not arrive at these high-stakes meetings unprepared. She brought with her the hard-earned wisdom from the settlement houses of New York. For years, she had listened to the struggles of working-class families. She understood the real-world impact of low wages and inflated prices on the kitchen table budget. When industry leaders argued for higher prices, she was the voice reminding them of the mother trying to feed her children. When labor unions pushed for better pay, she was the one who could articulate how that extra income would circulate back into local businesses. She was, in essence, the conscience of the recovery effort, fighting to ensure that the grand economic theories being debated in Washington did not forget the human beings they were meant to serve. Her position placed her at the white-hot center of the most contentious economic battles of the era, making her both a celebrated champion for the common citizen and a formidable obstacle to powerful corporate interests. How many enemies could a woman make by simply insisting that people mattered more than profit? Mary Rumsey walked into those tense committee rooms armed with a simple, powerful truth she had learned not in a boardroom, but on the tenement stairs of New York. The abstract economic theories debated by men in suits had a direct human cost, and she was there to make sure that cost was not borne by the families who could least afford it. Her mission on the Consumer Advisory Board was to embed fairness directly into the National Recovery Administration's codes. She fought for clear labeling so people knew what they were buying. She battled against price-fixing schemes that would have allowed industries to collude and drive up the cost of basic necessities like milk, bread, and coal. For Mary, a fair price was not just an economic principle, it was a moral imperative. She understood that a few extra cents on a loaf of bread could mean the difference between a child going to bed hungry or fed, especially in the depths of the Depression. This perspective put her on a direct collision course with powerful titans of industry. These business leaders, accustomed to shaping government policy to their advantage, were stunned to encounter a woman who refused to be intimidated by their stature or their arguments. She would listen patiently to their complex justifications for higher prices, and then she would respond with a quiet, devastating question, asking exactly how a working-class family was supposed to absorb that increase. Her power did not come from raising her voice, but from the unassailable logic of her position and her intimate knowledge of the household budgets she was sworn to protect. She quickly proved herself to be one of the most effective and respected administrators in the entire New Deal apparatus, a woman who could translate the lived experience of poverty into actionable, equitable policy. Yet with every code, she strengthened in favor of the consumer. With every corporate loophole she closed, she quietly accumulated a list of powerful adversaries. These were men who saw her not as a public servant, but as a traitor to her own class, a heiress who had turned her back on the very system that created her fortune. How far would they go to silence a voice that was costing them millions? The morning of December 18th, 1934, dawned crisp and clear over the sprawling estate in Sands Point, Long Island. Mary Harriman Rumsey, now 53, was at the height of her influence, balancing the demands of her Washington role with the deep personal solace she found at her country home. Her schedule was a familiar one, a brief respite from the political battles of the capital before returning to the fray. Her mind was likely occupied with the ongoing work of the Consumer Advisory Board, the latest industrial codes needing review, the persistent pushback from steel and textile executives. Yet the pull of the outdoors, the promise of a gallop across familiar fields, offered a necessary escape. The decision to ride was as natural to her as breathing. She chose her favorite horse, a powerful and trusted animal, a partner in countless moments of peace and exhilaration. The routine was so normal, so deeply ingrained in the rhythm of her life, that there was no reason for anyone, least of all Mary herself, to sense anything but the promise of a refreshing morning. The stable hands would have prepared the saddle, the cold air biting at their cheeks as they worked. Mary, dressed in her riding clothes, would have felt that familiar surge of anticipation, the simple joy of leaving earthly worries behind for the pure physical conversation between rider and horse. Every detail of that morning pointed toward a simple, ordinary pleasure, a moment of quiet before returning to a world of immense responsibility. How could such a familiar ritual, a source of such profound happiness, conceal a tragedy waiting just one stumble away? The familiar rhythm of the ride began without warning. Her horse, perhaps startled by an unseen bird or a sudden shift in the light, shied violently. In an instant, the powerful animal recoiled, its hooves scrambling for purchase on the cold, hard ground. The seamless partnership between rider and horse shattered. Mary was thrown from the saddle with tremendous force, her body hitting the unyielding earth. The impact was brutal and decisive, a catastrophic blow to her head. The very activity that had always symbolized her freedom and vitality had, in a single, unscripted moment, betrayed her. On that quiet December morning, a life defined by purpose and action was halted by a simple, tragic misstep. The ride was over in a heartbeat, leaving only a still, silent figure on the ground in a world about to be irrevocably changed. The silence was broken by a shout of alarm. A stable hand or a fellow rider saw her fall and rushed to her side, finding the heiress motionless on the frozen ground. The scene erupted into a frantic blur of action. Someone sprinted to the main house to telephone for an ambulance, while others carefully tried to make her comfortable, their breath fogging in the cold air as they worked. The initial response was fueled by a desperate, urgent hope. She was Mary Harriman Rumsey, a woman of immense vitality, and surely such a spirit could not be so easily broken. The ambulance arrived with its jarring siren, a modern intrusion onto the pastoral estate. Paramedics swiftly assessed the grave head injury and began emergency procedures right there in the field, their movements precise and hurried. They stabilized her as best they could for the desperate race to the hospital. Every bump in the road during that transport was a moment of agonizing tension, each second critical. Upon arrival at the hospital, she was immediately swept into the care of the best doctors money and influence could summon. For a brief, agonizing period, there was a flicker of possibility. The medical team fought to relieve the pressure on her brain, employing every technique available in 1934. Family members gathered, clinging to the reports from the operating room, believing that her formidable will to live would see her through. But the damage from the impact was too severe. The hope that had initially animated the frantic rescue efforts began to drain away, replaced by the grim, quiet understanding of the physicians. There was nothing more they could do. The vibrant woman who had commanded rooms in Washington and brought comfort to tenements in New York was slipping away, her extensive network of power and influence utterly useless against the simple, brutal physics of a fall. The official cause of death was a fractured skull. In the medical understanding of 1934, such an injury was almost always a death sentence. The force of the impact had shattered the bone protecting her brain, causing immediate and catastrophic damage. There was no delicate surgery to repair such trauma, no advanced imaging to guide a surgeon's hand. The best doctors could do was attempt to relieve the pressure, but the internal bleeding and swelling were simply too severe. Her brain, the very source of her formidable intellect and driving compassion, had been irreparably harmed by the unyielding ground. It was a brutal, mechanical end, a failure of the body's most vital fortress. One moment, she was a living, breathing person full of plans and purpose. In the next, a complex network of thoughts and memories was silenced forever. The same passion for riding that defined her life's greatest joys had delivered its final, cruel contradiction. How could something she loved so deeply betray her so completely? News of the tragedy spread with the morning papers, casting a pall over the nation just days before Christmas. Headlines from New York to San Francisco screamed the shocking news. Prominent woman dies in riding accident, declared the New York Times, while the Washington Post led with, Mrs. Rumsey killed by fall from horse. For a public accustomed to seeing her name in the society pages or in reports on the New Deal, the suddenness of her death was a profound shock. It was as if a pillar of the national community had vanished in an instant. From the White House, a deeply moved President Franklin Roosevelt issued a heartfelt public statement. He spoke not just of a valued official, but of a personal friend and an indispensable ally in the fight for recovery. He praised her keen intellect and her unwavering devotion to the public good, calling her loss a tragedy for the entire country. His words carried the weight of genuine grief, a testament to the unique role she played in his inner circle. But the most poignant mourning did not happen in the halls of power. It unfolded in the settlement houses of New York's Lower East Side, where immigrant mothers wept for the woman who had fought for their children's futures. It echoed in the meeting halls of the Junior League, where thousands of women felt the loss of their founding inspiration. Telegrams of condolence flooded the family, not from diplomats and industrialists, but from labor unions, consumer advocacy groups, and educational charities, each one a small testament to a life lived in service to others. The sheer breadth of the grief revealed a stunning truth. Mary Harriman Rumsey was not just an heiress who had done some good. She was a national figure who had woven herself into the very fabric of American society, from the tenements to the White House. Her death left a void that was felt as keenly on Main Street as it was on Pennsylvania Avenue, proving that her legacy was not measured in dollars, but in the multitude of lives she had quietly touched and transformed. The funeral of Mary Harriman Rumsey was a spectacle of sorrow, a gathering that mirrored the dual worlds she had so masterfully inhabited. Held at the elegant St. Bartholomew's Church in Manhattan, the service drew a congregation that was a living map of her influence. In the pews sat the surviving titans of the Gilded Age, men in somber black, who represented the vast industrial fortunes of her birth. Directly alongside them sat the architects of the New Deal, the lawyers and economists and labor leaders with whom she had plotted a more equitable future. The scene was a powerful, silent testament to a life that could not be confined to a single sphere. President Roosevelt, physically unable to attend, sent a towering wreath of flowers and his most trusted aides to represent a grieving administration. Her brother, Avril, sat with the family, his own global power now overshadowed by a more intimate, personal loss. Her husband, Charles Carey Rumsey, the celebrated sculptor and polo star, was a portrait of shattered strength, the vibrant partnership they had built now reduced to a solitary, aching void. The hymns that echoed through the vaulted church were the same ones sung in countless society funerals, but the collective grief in the room carried a different, more complex weight. This was not just the passing of a socialite. It was the silencing of a national voice. Following the service, a private procession carried her casket to the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, a final resting place for many of New York's elite. There, amidst the grand mausoleums and sculpted angels, she was laid to rest. The earth that closed over Mary Harriman Rumsey held a profound contradiction. She was buried with the rights and honors of the aristocracy she was born into. Yet the legacy she left behind belonged utterly to the public she had chosen to serve. The private family grief for a wife and mother was, on that day, inextricably woven into the nation's mourning for a champion. But in the shadow of such a public tragedy, whispers began to circulate almost immediately. The official story was clean, simple, and tragically common, a riding accident. Yet for many, the death of a figure as prominent and politically active as Mary Harriman Rumsey felt too convenient, too perfectly timed. How could a woman of her experience, a lifelong equestrian who handled the most powerful thoroughbreds, be taken down by a simple stumble? The quiet question hung in the air: was this truly an accident, or was it something else? Conspiracy theories began to weave their dark threads through the fabric of the official narrative. The most persistent speculation pointed directly to her work in Washington. As the chairwoman of the Consumer Advisory Board, Mary had not been hosting charity galas. She had been waging economic war against some of the most powerful corporate interests in the nation. She had stared down steel magnates and textile barons, blocking their attempts to fix prices at the expense of struggling families. Every time she stood her ground, she cost these industrial titans millions of dollars and bruised their considerable egos. In the cutthroat world of high-stakes capitalism, her death could be seen not as a tragedy, but as a strategic removal of a formidable obstacle. Who were these men she had challenged? Their names were legends of industry, figures accustomed to getting their way, with the resources and connections to make problems disappear. The theory suggested that a staged accident, a spooked horse on a familiar trail, would be an elegant and untraceable solution. It was the kind of quiet violence that fit the era, a time when union organizers could vanish and corporate espionage was a brutal fact of life. Another layer of suspicion fell upon the political landscape itself. The New Deal was not a universally beloved program. It was a radical restructuring of the American economy that faced fierce opposition from conservatives who saw it as socialism. Mary was a key lieutenant in this revolution, a trusted insider with the president's ear. Her removal would weaken Roosevelt's inner circle and disrupt a critical arm of his recovery efforts. The whispers asked, could partisan enemies have orchestrated her death to cripple a policy they despised? The perfect, mundane cover of a riding accident made it all too plausible. Yet for all the compelling motives and dark suspicions, there is one overwhelming, inconvenient truth: a complete absence of any concrete evidence. No threatening letters were ever found. No witnesses reported seeing anyone tamper with her horse or saddle. No deathbed confession emerged decades later from a remorseful accomplice. The Sands Point estate was not a public place where a stranger could easily lurk. It was a private, guarded home. The stable hands were loyal, long-time employees. The investigation, what little there was for a case everyone assumed was a straightforward accident, turned up nothing to suggest foul play. The official record remains unchanged to this day, a tragic death by misadventure. This leaves us with two equally unsettling possibilities. One, that a brilliant and vital life was indeed erased by a moment of random, meaningless chance, a cruel twist of fate that makes no sense. Or two, that a perfectly executed crime was carried out with such chilling professionalism that it left no trace for history to find. We are left to weigh the sheer improbability of her fatal fall against the complete lack of proof for anything else. The silence surrounding her death is perhaps the loudest and most haunting part of the entire story. The tragedy that silenced Mary did not, however, extinguish the Harriman ambition. Her brother, William Averill Harriman, had already been navigating the highest echelons of power, but the sudden loss of his sister seemed to cast a new, more urgent shadow over his own path. Or Mary's work had been a crusade for domestic justice. Averill's arena was the entire world. He became a central figure in the most delicate diplomatic missions of the 20th century, serving as President Franklin Roosevelt's special envoy to Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin during the Second World War. He was, in many ways, the embodiment of the global influence their father had envisioned, a man who could speak to prime ministers and marshals as an equal. Yet, one cannot help but wonder if Mary's very public death, a consequence of her own deep engagement with national service, reinforced for him the fragility of life and the importance of cementing a legacy that mattered. He did not retreat from public view. He accelerated his commitment. After the war, he was appointed Secretary of Commerce, and then, in a move that echoed his sister's hands-on approach to American problems, he was elected governor of New York. In that role, he championed education, infrastructure, and social programs, pursuing a progressive agenda that felt, in spirit, like a continuation of the very reforms Mary had championed from her seat on the Consumer Advisory Board. He was not merely building his own career, he was ensuring the Harriman name remained synonymous not just with wealth, but with consequential public action. The brother and sister, though their methods and stages differed, were two powerful currents flowing from the same source, one reaching across the globe while the other nourished the roots at home. Averil's long and storied life ensured the family's political dynasty endured for decades, a living monument to a legacy that Mary had helped define through her own sacrifice. The three children left behind in that quiet Virginia house now faced a world without its center. Charles Carey Jr. was 17, his sister Mary was 15, and young Bronson was just 11 years old. In a single afternoon, the vibrant mother who had balanced Washington power with bedtime stories was gone, her guiding hand suddenly withdrawn at the most formative moments of their lives. They were not just any children. They were heirs to two distinct and demanding dynasties, the Harriman legacy of immense wealth and public duty, and the Rumsey tradition of artistic expression and athletic prowess. How does a child process such a loss? And how do they navigate the colossal expectations that came with their names? Their father, Charles Carey Rumsey, was left to raise them alone, a grieving widower whose own world of sculpture and polo must have felt profoundly empty. He surrounded them with the familiar comforts of their estate, the Plains, a place still echoing with their mother's spirit. The stables remained full, the polo fields were meticulously maintained, and the artistic milieu of their father's friends provided a creative sanctuary. Yet the absence of Mary Harriman Rumsey was a constant, silent presence in their home, a reminder of a specific kind of ambition and intellect that was no longer at the dinner table to challenge and inspire them. Each child would grapple with this void in their own way, their lives becoming a quiet testament to the mother they lost and the powerful forces of inheritance that shaped them. Charles Carey Rumsey Jr., the eldest, seemed to step most directly into the mold his parents had crafted. He embraced the equestrian life that had defined their happiest moments, becoming an accomplished polo player like his father and a skilled horseman. He attended the finest schools and moved in the same elite circles, his path seemingly set for a life of comfortable privilege. Yet the shadow of his mother's monumental public service loomed. Did he feel the pressure to match her civic contributions? Or did the tragedy of her death in the saddle steer him toward a quieter, less public existence? He carried the Rumsey name with grace, but the relentless Harriman drive for legacy seemed to manifest differently in him, channeled more into private pursuits and family life than the national stage his mother and uncle had commanded. His life, while undoubtedly full, stood in subtle contrast to the world-changing ambitions that had consumed his mother. It was as if the very passion that had brought his parents together had also taken her from him, leaving a complex and perhaps cautionary relationship with the kind of high-stakes engagement that defined her. His sister, Mary, bore not only her mother's name, but also her fierce independence and intellect. As a young woman coming of age in the wake of such a loss, she would have been acutely aware of the path her mother had blazed for women of their class. She was educated at the prestigious Foxcroft School, an institution known for cultivating strong, capable women, and she grew into a sharp and perceptive figure. Unlike her brother, Mary did not retreat into the private sphere. She married into another prominent family, the Bakers, and engaged with the social and philanthropic expectations of her station. Yet those who knew her noted a formidable mind and a will of her own, qualities that echoed her mother's. While she did not launch a national organization like the Junior League, she understood the power and responsibility of her position. Her life reflected a nuanced interpretation of her mother's legacy, one that balanced the traditional roles of a society matron with the intellectual curiosity and strength she had undoubtedly inherited. She lived with the weight of a famous name, striving to honor it in a world that had dramatically changed since her mother's pioneering days. The youngest, Bronson Rumsey, was the most deeply shaped by the absence he could barely remember. At 11, a boy loses his mother just as he is stepping from childhood into adolescence, a loss that can define a personality. Raised primarily by his grieving father and within the insular world of their Virginia estate, Bronson's connection to the sprawling Harriman clan and its relentless sense of mission was more distant. His life followed a more private track, away from the glaring spotlight of politics or high society that his uncle and mother had occupied. He pursued a career in finance, a field that connected him to the source of the Harriman fortune, but from a discreet, behind-the-scenes position. His story is perhaps the most poignant, representing a quiet divergence from the very public legacies he inherited. The death of his mother may have severed a direct link to the crusading spirit that drove her, leaving him to find his own way without her direct influence. The three Rumsey children, therefore, present a fractured reflection of their mother's unified legacy. One embraced the family's outward passion, another its intellectual strength in a private context, and the third found his path at a remove from it all. Together, their lives ask a haunting question about the nature of influence. Can a legacy of such fiery purpose be passed down, or does its flame inevitably gutter when the person who carried it is taken too soon? This profound duality was the engine of her entire life. Mary Harriman Rumsey lived in a constant state of negotiation between two worlds, a gilded inheritance and a gritty calling. She was born into a fortress of wealth designed to shield her from the world's harshness. Yet she spent her adulthood deliberately dismantling its walls from the inside. The very fortune that could have purchased a lifetime of idle comfort became, in her hands, the fuel for a relentless work ethic. She did not see her wealth as an identity to be celebrated, but as a tool to be used, a resource that obligated her to labor harder, not less. This created a unique kind of tension. In the ballrooms of New York, she was a Harriman, a name that commanded deference. In the settlement houses, she was simply Mary, a volunteer who had to earn trust through action, not lineage. How exhausting it must have been, this constant shifting of masks, yet she never seemed to see it as a burden. For her, the synergy between these two lives was the point. Her social standing gave her access to the powerful men who controlled the systems she wanted to change. Her firsthand experience in the tenements gave her the moral authority to look those same men in the eye and tell them their policies were failing real people. She used the language of the elite to advocate for the powerless, turning her privilege into a potent form of insider activism. This was not a woman trying to escape her background, but one trying to redeem it, to prove that great fortune could be married to even greater purpose. The heiress funded the mission, and the public servant gave that mission its soul. One could not have existed without the other, and in their fiery combination, she found a way to be truly, wholly herself. Honoring their fallen founder became the Junior League's sacred duty. In the wake of Mary's shocking death, the organization she had launched as a young woman did not simply mourn, it mobilized. Her vision of trained, effective volunteerism became her most powerful and enduring monument. They established memorials in her name, not as cold statues, but as living, breathing instruments of service. Scholarships were created to educate new generations of women in the principles of social work and civic leadership, ensuring that Mary's own intellectual curiosity would be passed forward. But the greatest memorial was not a single program or fund. It was the relentless, evolving work of the League itself. For over a century, the organization has continued to embody her radical idea, adapting to the needs of each new era while holding fast to her core belief that privilege must be coupled with purpose. During the Great Depression, leagues across the country operated soup kitchens and clothing banks. In the war years, they organized relief efforts and supported military families. When new social crises emerged around civil rights, public health, and literacy, the Junior League was there, its members trained to assess needs, develop strategic responses, and advocate for systemic change. This is the tangible legacy Mary Harriman Rumsey left behind, an army of women empowered to lead. The young debutante who once taught sewing in a Lower East Side settlement house ultimately built a perpetual engine for social good, an institution that has touched millions of lives. Her story asks a profound question of us all. What will we build with the privileges we have been given? History has often struggled to place Mary Harriman Rumsey in a single, tidy box. For decades after her death, the dramatic nature of her final moments risked overshadowing the substance of her life. She was frequently memorialized as the tragic heiress, the society woman whose life was cut short in a freak accident, a figure of poignant what-ifs. This narrative, while compelling, is a profound disservice to the woman she actually was. It reduces a life of immense agency and calculated impact to a single, random event, framing her as a victim of circumstance rather than the architect of her own formidable destiny. A more recent scholarship, however, has begun to correct this imbalance. A new generation of historians and biographers is meticulously disentangling her professional legacy from the sensationalism of her death. They are digging past the headlines of December 1934 to uncover the detailed work of the preceding 53 years. Their focus is on her groundbreaking role not as a philanthropist who wrote checks, but as a public administrator who wielded real power in the all-male arena of federal policy. They highlight her strategic mind, her ability to translate grassroots experience into national policy, and her quiet, relentless negotiation for consumer rights during the nation's greatest economic crisis. This reassessment asks us to see her not as a casualty of a riding accident, but as a pioneer of the New Deal, a woman who helped build the modern American social safety net. It is a conscious effort to shift the spotlight from the sands of a Long Island estate to the committee rooms of Washington, where her true legacy was forged. The question for us now is not how she died, but how she lived, and why it took so long for the full measure of her contributions to come into clear, deserving focus. Mary Harriman Rumsey's story is a journey from a gilded ballroom to the heart of American power. She transformed an inheritance of unimaginable wealth into a weapon for social justice, channeling the same relentless drive her father used to build railroads into the fight for fair wages and safe housing. Her life became a powerful argument that privilege should not be a shield from the world's problems, but a tool to solve them. This makes the manner of her death so deeply ironic. The very passion that symbolized her freedom and vitality, the thrill of the ride, the partnership with a powerful animal, was also the source of her sudden end. A life dedicated to vigorous, purposeful action was ultimately silenced by a moment of random chance within the pursuit of a personal joy. Her legacy, therefore, is a complex tapestry woven with threads of monumental public achievement and profound personal tragedy. Should we remember her primarily as the tragic heiress, the woman whose story ended too soon on a cold December morning? Or does that focus diminish the true scale of her impact? Perhaps her truer monument is the enduring power of the Junior League, a testament to her belief that organized compassion can reshape society. It is in the countless consumer protections she fought for, and in the very idea that the voices of ordinary people deserve a seat at the table of power. Her life asks us a final, haunting question. How do you measure a legacy? By the length of a life, or by the depth of its mark on the world? Let us know what you think about this remarkable woman in the comments below.